welcome to the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast. Over the course of this past season, we have talked a lot about finding value and how to be a savvy wine buyer. And even though we've talked at length about all the different ways that you can shop like a savvy wine buyer, you can look for things, you can travel, one thing we really haven't touched on is you and your palate and how to discover the things that you like yourself without me telling you, what's good in your glass. And for me, over my wine journey, that has been one of the more difficult things. It's also the thing that I hear people talk about a lot. How do I know what I like? How do I know what I'm tasting in the glass? What am I tasting in the glass? And so this episode is all about discovering your palate, learning to trust it, and all the ways that wine professionals like myself and my guest go about doing that, both professionally and personally. Now, my guest today does that a lot, and he does it on camera very often as one of the most subscribed to and followed to personalities in the wine industry. He's Germany's youngest master of wine, and you probably have seen him a time or two around social media talking about things like, is this DRC worth it? Should I be drinking more Grand Cru Classé Bordeaux, or is this $15 bottle just okay? With me today is Konstantin Baum. We are officially meeting for the first time here in this space that I remember. But in the course of our conversation leading up to this, it turns out we actually had a little bit of a meetup before that I must have had too much wine and I don't remember. So please welcome to the show, Konstantin Baum. Nice to see you again, but
Hi,
have
Amanda.
to remind me. You have to remind me how this happened.
We've actually met in a restaurant in Italy.
Okay. In Italy?
In a city called Verona, which you will know.
Yes. Wait, did we meet at Bottega del Vino?
That's it. That's the place. I was there with a friend of mine. I think it was during Wine to Wine at Vinitaly or during the Vinitaly.
Yes. I remember now.
I was sitting with my friend, and you joined, or you came into the restaurant later on, and I kind of saw you sitting down, and I was like, that's the Somme Vivant girl, and we finished our dinner, and at the end, I kind of thought, well, why not come over and say hi?
I will preface this all by saying I've been to Antica Bottega del Vino twice, and both times I have been overserved. So
yeah, you had some like old Amaronis, I think, when we met. So you had some great wines on the table.
Yeah, we started off not strong. We started off the sommelier had recommended something that I was not super excited about. And then I think that was maybe when June Rodil was also at the restaurant. And so I went over to her and I was like, hey, listen, you've got to help us out here. Like, help me find some wines that we're going to like, because Italy is not my forte, especially in that region. And so she helped us. And then we ended up getting a different sommelier that ended up taking over. And then we really had fun that night. But it's great to have you on the show, because I think today is going to be a really fun episode to talk about our respective journeys and finding our own palates. You've been a master of wine now for how long?
For 9 years now. So
Wow.
It's been a while. 2015 was the year when I got the qualification.
And I would never ask someone this normally, but given that one of your accolades is that you were Germany's youngest master of wine, how old were you when you became a master of wine?
So I'm 42 now, so not that young anymore, but I'm still the youngest German master of wine. But yeah, so I was 33 back then. So I passed the exams, I think, when I was 31, wow. And then you always have to kind of hand in a research paper or dissertation at the end. And that took me a little longer. So I finished when I was 33.
That's very impressive. For those who are wondering what a master of wine is, it's different than a master sommelier. Masters of wine they're more common. You see them more in Europe and in the UK. It's becoming more common in the US now, but they follow a slightly different path, just as rigorous, perhaps, if not more, much more on the academic sense. And if you remember season 1 and part of season 2, Vanessa Conlin, who was my podcast co-host, she is also a master of wine. But was wine on your table growing up? I know you're German born, but is that something that you experienced as a kid or as a teenager?
Yeah, I'm from like the northern half of Germany, so there's no wine growing going on in the city where I'm from. I'm from a town called Bielefeld. No one will know it. It's a fairly big city, but there's also not really a wine culture, so people don't really drink wine there. My parents drank wine, and we had wine on the table, not every day, but regularly. And I got interested in wine fairly early on. But when I was a teenager, I was like most Germans, I was drinking beer. And every now and then I had some wine. My father once took me to a wine shop and I tasted some wine there for the first time. But yeah, it wasn't really in my I didn't know anyone working in wine, so there was no career path that I saw growing up as a teenager in Bielefeld that would have led me into wine. But when I finished school, I kind of decided that I want to go into hospitality and become the manager of a great hotel. And in Germany, the way it works, or in some other countries in Europe, it's the same thing. But you do not an internship, an apprenticeship, which is like a structured part work, part school education kind of qualification. And I did that after I finished my school, and I realized that I'm really interested in wine. So at that point, I kind of decided that I don't want to be the manager of a hotel. I want to be in wine, but I still didn't quite know what I was going to do in the wine space at that point. It wasn't really clear to me. So I had to kind of work my way through the wine world in order to find out what I really wanted to do.
It's interesting that you went the direction of Master of Wine and not Master of Sommelier. So did you work as a sommelier, or did you just directly take the path of Master of Wine?
Yeah, I worked as a sommelier at a 2-star Michelin restaurant in Dublin, of all places, in restaurant Patrick Guibault, it's called. I think it's still the only 2-star Michelin restaurant in Ireland. And that was an amazing period for me because I got to taste so many great wines. It was kind of the place where everyone went who had money and was interested in food and wine. So we had lots of really great guests who consumed amazing bottles of wine, and we had a very deep wine list there. Bono and The Edge from U2, and they were regulars. They came in quite often when they were not on tour, and Sinead O'Connor and all those kind of Irish heroes. They all came in every now and then. But yeah, during that time, I also figured out that I wanted to pursue the Master of Wine, but the Master Sommelier was never really on my mind. And in the end, for me, looking back, I think I made the right decision because I didn't want to follow that career path working on the floor after my time in Dublin. I really enjoyed it, but I also kind of didn't see that I was going to stay in that industry for the rest of my life. So I wanted to do something a little bit more academic and less service oriented. And the big difference, as you explained it already, between the Master of Wine and the Master Sommelier is that the Master Sommelier is really for the person working in the restaurant and serving the guests and advising the guests. And that is also a really important part of the exam, obviously, like doing the service bit and making sure that you know everything you need to know on the floor. While the Master of Wine is designed for the wine trade, for the wine press. And we also now have quite a few winemakers involved in the program. So it's more theoretical, a little bit more more on the academic side of things. And there's, for example, no service element there. We have to taste a few more wines in the blind tasting exam. I think for the Master Sommelier it's 6, and for the Master of Wine it's 36 across 3 days. It's written. The tasting exam is written, and also the theory exam is written. And you have to write long form essays on different topics, from viticulture to enology to wine business and marketing.
for anyone just even thinking about going down this path, please just know that like this is something that you could spend your entire life chasing and never get to. I mean, the pass rate for both the Master of Wine and Master Sommelier, the rates to pass are so incredibly low. So it's incredibly impressive when someone does pass it, especially at such a young age. I want to jump into later when you started to like wine, but before we get there, I want to talk about what's going on in the wine world. I don't know if I've mentioned it on this podcast before, but I am one of the biggest Dolly Parton fans out there. Like, I love her. She can do no wrong. I also know that I am not alone in feeling this way. She's a national treasure. She is beloved by most, if not all. But my question to you, Konstantin, my German friend, is Dolly Parton universally beloved? Is she like a known entity there?
I don't think many people here know who she is. I mean, I know who she is because I follow American media quite a bit, but she's not really well known in Germany. I think she could walk down the street in Berlin without too many people at least recognizing her.
No way. She's so iconic and like recognizable. The big hair, the big, everything. Well, anyway, she, despite all of that, she's also one of the greatest songwriters out there, which not a lot of people know. She's written some of the most incredible songs out there. I Will Always Love You is, of course, one of her most famous ones.
Yeah, people know Whitney Houston in Germany, but not
right.
Not
they know Whitney, but Dolly wrote the song. She did it originally. Yeah. Anyway, Dolly Parton is entering the wine game by way of 3 wines: a Chardonnay, a Prosecco, and a Rosé. She's a great songwriter. I'm not sure how she's going to fare in the wine world, but I do know that you have reviewed a few celebrity wines yourself. I've done a few myself, mostly to little or no acclaim. How do you feel about the celebrity wine game?
I think personally, I wouldn't buy a bottle of wine just because it's endorsed or because it's like under the brand of a celebrity, unless I'm a big fan of that person. Like if I'm a big Bob Dylan guy, if Bob Dylan would bring out a wine, I'd be interested. I'd taste it, but I wouldn't expect too much of it. But I think most of those wines are just an attempt to kind of turn your name into money, really. Sometimes those wines can be really delicious, and sometimes they can be quite boring and
awful.
Not so interesting. I mean, I personally really, I think Pink, for example, she actually has her own wine brand and winery, and she's also, from what I can tell at least, a little bit involved in it. So
yeah, she's the exception to the celebrity rule. So she owns a vineyard and some property in the Santa Barbara area, and actually bought it in complete secret. Nobody knew for years that it was she and her husband and her kids that were living there. Farms it, does a lot of the work herself, and that wine is fantastic. But she's the exception to the rule for me. There are very few celebrity endorsed wines that I can get behind. I won't name names, but you can just assume that mostly I'm not a big fan. It is interesting to me that Dolly Parton, she's had such a prolific career, and she's not young. Like, I don't know what she is at this point, but she's not young. The fact that she's getting into the wine game at this point in her life when she doesn't really need to, I don't know. There's something about like doing that I'm like, why would she say yes to doing something when she's had such great success in every other facet? So to me, it actually makes me curious to try it.
Is it an actual Prosecco, or is it a sparkling wine that they call Prosecco?
They're calling it Prosecco. They're actually only releasing the Chardonnay in the United States, so I don't think the Prosecco and the Rosé are available quite yet. And she did it in partnership with Accolade Wines, which I think is an Australian entity, quite a large one at that. So I don't know. I assume it's real Prosecco, but who knows, Yeah,
I mean, the Australians have a bit of a different relationship to Prosecco. They are the only ones kind of still calling their glaras that they produce Prosecco, and have fared quite well with that over the last years. I actually just finished producing a video on misunderstandings when it comes to Prosecco, and And yeah, I mean, it's not everywhere. It's quite clear to people what Prosecco actually is, that it is a region and a designation rather than just a slightly sparkling, fizzy kind of wine.
Right. And did you distinguish between Prosecco and Prosecco DOCG? Because I was just there and there was a very big distinction.
Yeah, I mean, Prosecco DOC and Prosecco DOCG, and there's obviously also a difference there. And they are two different bodies that market themselves slightly
very different. Yeah. Well, time will tell. I'm excited to see if there's any social media content that comes out of this, because I, for one, would love to see Dolly, walking around a winery or something in like her big heels and just tasting everything with her Dolly energy. The other thing I'm excited about, even 20 years later, is the movie Sideways. Congratulations to Sideways, which is enjoying its 20th anniversary, if you can believe it, this October in 2024. I actually remember when this movie came out because I was a senior in high school. And I remember I was working at a bed and breakfast at the time, and the innkeepers were absolutely obsessed with this film. And I could not understand why. I tried to watch it and I was like, I don't get it. It's not for me. And then I went back and I watched it again with my wine lenses on, and things sort of shifted. And I was like, all right, it's a cool classic. It's good. What is your relationship with the movie Sideways before we dive into the impact that it had on American wine culture?
I did like that movie. It was funny. It was entertaining. It kind of made wine a little bit more relatable to more people. And I really believe that we in the wine industry have to make sure that we do that more often, reach out to the general public and make wine and our fascination for wine more relevant to people who don't taste wine every day and read all the wine books.
It is kind of a shame that it's been 20 years since we've had anything like that. And I think Mondovino is sort of the same. If you were a little bit more ingratiated in the wine universe, you probably saw that film. But for those who haven't seen Sideways, go back and watch it. It really is the reason that California Pinot Noir became what it is today. Santa Barbara Pinot really owes a lot of their success to this film, and Merlot is still shaking in its boots because it has not made a comeback. All of the vines got yanked out and replanted to Pinot, and I think for some of us, we're a little bit sad that it's never really made the resurgence that we'd hoped it would. But at the same time, it's also what's kept the prices down on Merlot and made it a slightly more affordable grape than Cabernet Sauvignon. So I guess there's good and bad in all of this.
But yeah, Sideways, Mondovino, all those two projects, a few other ones maybe as well, just kind of showed that there is enough interest in the world for a movie about wine if you get it right, if you tell the story right.
Well, and the Somm documentary came out not that long after. I mean, it was maybe 2012, 13 that the Somm documentary came out. And again, a film that really should not have had the international success that it did, because it was very deep in wine, and yet people that are not in the wine industry at all know the movie Somm. And it's the reason that people ask me today, what level Somm are you? Because they've seen this movie and they're like, well, everyone.
And that's kind of very frustrating for us masters of wine, because it happens very often that you kind of explain to someone what you're doing and that you have this qualification, and then they go, I've seen that movie on Netflix. Yeah.
No, different film.
That's different not the master of wine.
Yeah. I would love to see in my time and our time another mainstream film about wine have the international success that Sideways did. But congratulations, it's still a movie that's relevant. It's still a movie that people watch. I see it still on the streaming platforms, and I will go back and watch Miles freak out, any day of the week. Speaking of any day of the week, we are drinking mostly every day of the week in this house, and hopefully you are too. So if you want a little help with that, this is your cue to sign up for the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast Wine Club. This is the wine club that's associated with every single episode that we put out. One bottle goes with each episode. You get 4 bottles in your shipment. They arrive about every 2 months. And then our episodes, of course, come out every 2 weeks. So you always have something to drink with us. And we also do fun little tasting videos on the side if you really want to geek out about the wines that we're drinking. In your shipment should be a beautiful wax top bottle of this wine right here, the Saturday's Child, coming from McFarlane Wines. This is Pinotage from South Africa. So if you want to go ahead and drink with us, grab that bottle now. And if you haven't done so already, I do recommend getting a slight chill on that. So put it in your fridge for a little while, get it nice and chilly, and then come back and join us when we talk about this wine and how to learn and trust your palate. See you guys in a second. First things first, we've got a wax top. I'm sure people have asked you this all the time, Konstantin. You know, what do I do with wax top? What do I do? And actually, I watched your Madeira video where you have the extra top in there that you just kind of go right through. The wax top, you just dive right into. So I'm putting my wine key right in the center of here, and I'm just gonna yank it up. If it's soft wax, it's much easier to do. If it's harder wax, a little bit more challenging. I know you're a little under. Are you sipping with me today or no?
Yeah, I got it here in my glass. I actually usually don't do it that way. I don't just pull it out. I kind of cut off the capsule the top, because I don't really like the thought of maybe some wax falling into my glass as I pour. But obviously this is kind of the easy way to do it if you have a good wax capsule and it doesn't kind of break into 1,000 little pieces.
Yeah, if it's soft wax, I'm okay with it. If it's harder wax, like I said, it's a little bit more challenging. You maybe want to score it. I actually usually go in after and just peel off some of the wax, so when I'm pouring, it's not touching. But
I kind of cut it like this, so that's.
Oh, you cut it all the way down. Yeah, is that difficult or no?
No, it was really easy with this one. It obviously depends on the wax, but with this bottle, it was fairly easy.
See, there's a lot of different ways to do this. Don't just listen to me. Listen to lots of people. Make your own choices. That's what this episode's all about. Virtual cheers to you.
Cheers.
All the way in Germany. You're in Germany right now, right?
Yeah, I'm sitting in my studio here in Baden-Baden in Germany. So in the southwest of Germany, right on the French border, basically. Yeah, it's a beautiful little spa town. So you can go there and kind of relax in the spas. And it's a pretty little place. Quite nice.
I like a spa.
Yeah.
I've actually never been to Germany, so that seems like a good excuse.
Never. But we also have vineyards in Baden-Baden. So there's not just spas. You can also come and visit the vineyards and the wineries around Baden-Baden.
I would love to go to Germany. I would love to do I would love to walk the vineyards there and see what's going on there. It's the last frontier for me in terms of getting to major wine regions. It's the one that I haven't been to yet. So maybe 2025 will be my year to get to Germany. And I'm actually, even though people mostly think I'm Irish and Scottish, I'm mostly German. All of my lineage is German. So I fit in very well there. Yeah. So we are drinking Pinotage. That is the grape. The producer is McFarlane Wines, and the cuvee is called Saturday's Child. For those who are very confused as to why I'm saying Pinotage and not Pinot Noir, that is because they are two different grapes, although Pinotage is a cross between Pinot Noir and Cinsault. I'm sure Konstantin has some feelings on Pinotage, just as I did back in the day. I would call this a polarizing grape amongst wine professionals, and a grape that not a lot of people know amongst the consumer world. Just a little bit about this particular wine. There's only 8 barrels produced of this. It's grown in the Western Cape of South Africa. It's farmed organically, mostly destemmed, so 85% destemmed. And then the grapes were foot tread, punched on gently about 3 times per day for 10 days before being pressed off to a tank and then racked to old French oak barrels for maturation and malolactic fermentation. This is a very pure, bright, fresh expression of the Pinotage grape. I can't say that I've had a ton of Pinotage because the South Africans love to drink it all themselves and very little gets exported out. The reason that we even have this wine in the shipment is because this was a direct import that our friend Andrew Wallach found and brought over for us. So I think you couldn't even find it in Germany. We had to ship it to you. So this is like a super tiny production wine.
Why is it called Saturday's Child? Is it?
It actually did say on the website, and now I'm completely blanking why
I first came across that when I listened to an interview with Jancis Robinson, and she kind of said that she's a very hardworking person, and she then said, I was born on a Saturday, and the interviewer kind of said, what does it that have anything to do with how hard you are working? And then she kind of said, there's this nursery rhyme saying Friday's child is loving and giving, Saturday's child works hard for a living. And I kind of thought, well, maybe that's a reference to it. And I obviously had to look up right away after she said that which day I was born on, and I found out that I was actually born on a Saturday. So that might be one of the reasons why I'm kind of working so hard. I don't know.
Yeah, I will say that tracks for you. Just when you Google like Konstantin Baum, there's a million things that come up outside of your YouTube channel, which if you watch the YouTube channel, you're like, obviously this is all this guy does for a living. There's no possible way you could do anything else, because the thought that goes into these videos, the professionalism around it, it looks like this is your primary focus and this is it for you. But then you dig a little deeper and you're like, well, he also has like an importing and trading company. He does like all this other stuff on the side. He's got like wine classes. There's like a million things that you do in this like spider web that is Konstantin Baum. So I'm not surprised that you're a hard worker, but I am curious, just, before we dive into like learning about your palate and my palate and how it came to be, when did the YouTube channel start and why did you do it? Because this is like, we're not a common breed amongst the wine world.
Yeah, I mean, I set up my YouTube channel 10 years ago, but in the beginning, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. So I really just posted a few videos, sometimes one video per year, something like that. And it was all in German. But I did it because I thought there's something missing on YouTube, something wine related missing. And in 2020, when COVID hit, I didn't get to travel as much. So I decided that I really want to do this. And obviously now I don't do it all myself. I have a team around me, someone who edits the videos and some people who help me prepare for the videos. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but I really enjoy it, and it's kind of really fulfilling. And I also obviously enjoy playing around with cameras, and yeah, I now travel quite a bit, making videos while I'm on the road, and those things are really a lot of fun.
I moved into more of the short form content, which has been an interesting space to live in, and a place where I have learned to trust my palate more. It's a place where I feel like I can go back and it's a little bit of a video diary for me to like see what my feelings were and how confident I was in saying something. But I wonder for you, I mean, you've been in the industry now for, I'm going to roughly say about 20 years, and like half of that has been on YouTube. When did you start to feel confident about your own palate and what you like? Was it immediate or was that more gradual for you?
No, it took some time. I mean, I started in the industry 22 years ago now. So I have quite a lot of experience in that industry, but still feeling 100% confident with your palate is actually not necessarily something that I've achieved yet. I think it's also good to be aware that you can be wrong. Like doing blind tastings, for example, is very difficult. And you're not always right. This kind of teaches you and that you should stay humble and don't think that you know everything. It's about continuously learning more. And this is kind of really something that I find a lot of pleasure in, to continue learning more and more about wine and about other topics.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is just, and this is the hardest thing to do, is figuring out what you like. What is your palate telling you? Is it a yes? Is it a no? Is it an I'm not sure? And I think any of those answers are perfectly okay. And I say that it's difficult because I do remember, and maybe you had a similar experience. I remember very early in my sommelier career going to a wine tasting that was being overseen by a master sommelier. And it was a champagne tasting. And we were tasting all of these different Bon Clairs of different champagnes, which is basically the still version of the sparkling wine before it gets re-fermented. And they can be incredibly high in acid. In some cases, they're really beautiful, but in this case, what we were tasting was so high in acidity, it was enamel tearing, and it literally tasted like bile to me. And I remember sitting in the tasting, and the master sommelier got up, and I'll say they were like, "Oh my God, this is delicious. I would drink this by itself. This is so great." And I'm just sitting there with the glass in my hand. I'm like, this is foul. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted. But this is the master sommelier that I looked up to. You know, I like what they do. I like what they represent. Like, surely my palate must be wrong. Surely I just haven't evolved into the taster that I know that I should be. And I distinctly remember that moment, because in time, I grew more confident to say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like.
I think that is, of course, a mistake many people make when they get into wine, that they think that someone else knows what tastes good, and that they should aspire to kind of get to that same level and copy that person's or those people's tasting notes or whatever. But in the end, that's not really what wine is about. Wine is about kind of finding your own palate and identifying the products that you really enjoy and sharing them with other people and listening to their opinions on those wines. I also really like, I mean, most of my friends are actually not from the wine industry. So I sometimes open really fancy bottles of wine and have them over dinner. And some of them will just go, well, I don't like this. This is too heavy, or I don't like this because it's too tannic or acidic. And I kind of smile and go, well, that's completely fine. You can have that other wine, or can have a more entry level wine if you want.
Right.
But this is actually one of the greatest expressions of that grape variety, in my opinion. And then I'll tell them why. And sometimes they get around to it, sometimes they don't, and that's fine too. So I think it's not really about converting people to your own taste profile. It's more about showing them what is out there, and then them discovering whether they like it or not.
I think that's great, because there is this tendency in the wine industry to, and especially in a world of scores and pricing, to suggest to people, this is what you should like. And the reason that you should like this is because this is a 97-point wine, or this is $1,000 wine, therefore you should like this. But I think giving people agency and giving them the tools to figure out what they like is the most important thing that you can do. Vivino is an interesting area that a lot of people love to criticize, because it's this aggregate score of many different feelings and thoughts around wine that really gets us absolutely nowhere, and doesn't allow you to form your own opinion, unless you're, of course, scoring it yourself. But what are some of the tools that you think people can employ to figure out their own palate and develop it for themselves?
I think there are many ways. I mean, the most obvious way to get to understand your own palate is by tasting wines on a regular basis, or going to a wine tasting where you can taste different wines side by side. I think that's quite powerful. Having a wine in isolation doesn't teach you nearly as much as having 3 wines side by side, maybe 3 wines from the same grape variety, but also just 3 different grape varieties, for example, from the same region, will give you quite a lot of understanding about what is intense flavor and what is not so intense flavor, what is rich tannins and what is light tannins, what is high acidity and what is low acidity. So doing those kinds of tastings can be really useful in order to understand wine, the context of wine, a little bit better. I do think that it can be quite helpful to follow certain critics, maybe even use something like Vivino in order to identify or discover new interesting wines. So say you want to get into Merlot from around the world, you can look that up on certain platforms in order to find great examples of that grape variety, and then you can kind of start tasting those wines. but you can also just kind of get together with your friends and everyone brings a bottle of that grape variety, and then you can kind of compare and contrast different styles in order to understand Merlot. And once you've got that figured out, then you can move on to the next wine. I actually also use aroma sets quite a bit.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I've purchased different sets. And there are some producers that actually make different aroma sets where they isolate an aroma, fill it into a little vial, and then sell those sets. They can be quite expensive, so I don't know whether that's for everyone. And in some cases, those aromas can also be a little bit artificial, so they don't smell like the real thing. I actually personally prefer buying just a number of empty glass bottles and then filling them with salt and different spices, herbs, even the skin of different fruits like the orange zest, for example, flower leaves, all those kinds of things. You can just kind of mix them up with a little bit of salt. The salt will make sure that the product doesn't turn bad so quickly, so it doesn't get moldy. It conserves the flavor as well. And that's very cheap. Obviously, you just need salt and a few glass bottles. And so you can build your own aroma set. And the great thing about it is that with those aromas, you never have the issue that they don't taste right. So they don't taste artificial ever, because they are the real thing.
Right.
And this also will make it maybe in some cases more difficult for you, because if you use one of those Le Nez de Vin sets, you can just go, well, this aroma doesn't smell anything like that fruit, and just put it away. And even if you're wrong, you can make yourself feel good. But if you actually have that fruit in that little glass bottle together with some salt, you can't do that. So I think that's a good way of exploring. I mean, when I was younger, my then girlfriend, now wife, and we actually played around with the spices and herbs in the spice rack in our kitchen. So we just opened them up, closed our eyes, and kind of smelled, and then tried to identify the different aromas, and that was quite useful in order to train your nose and get to understand how good you are at blind tasting those aromas. And it's a great way to kind of build up confidence when it comes to describing a wine, because as soon as you learn what those things actually smell like, you can also pick them out in a glass much better than before.
One of the hardest things to do in the world is assign a word that corresponds with what we're smelling and what we're tasting blindly. And I've talked about this before. It's, as kids, we are taught to assign words to what we're seeing, to what we're hearing, to what we're touching. But the other two senses are not quite as developed in that way. So, picture books are a great example of this, right? We see a bird, we see the word bird next to it. We hear an elephant do its thing, and we know that's an elephant. And then we touch something soft. We know that the word soft exists because of how we're feeling it on our fingertips. But when it comes to taste and when it comes to smell, those two things are not really taught in the same way, if at all. And so when we're adults and we're trying to figure out what it is that we're smelling in our glass or what we're tasting in our mouth, we have to retrain ourselves in almost the same way. And so what Konstantin is saying, and I think it's absolutely correct, is if you can almost do this flashcard memory with something like an aroma kit, where you're picking it up and you're smelling coffee and then you're saying the word coffee out loud, it makes it that much easier when you're in a wine glass with your nose and those things aren't in front of you to pick out those aromas and assign the smells to them. And so as you do that over time, you develop this skill almost like you develop as a kid. And you can take that with you as you're tasting, so that when you're anywhere, you can identify what is in the glass. And I think the other thing that you mentioned was this idea of side-by-sides. Tasting wine independent is great. You can really figure out what you like, what you don't like. But I think in the end, if you really want to get the most out of your wine drinking experience, you've got to do side by sides. And so, picking out grapes from different regions, Merlots, Pinot Noirs from all over the world. I think those are great ways to figure out what it is you like and what it is you don't like, and do your best to take notes. I know it's easy to get like lost in, the wine and have a little fun with that. But if you can take notes, or at least, jot down some thoughts while you're tasting, I think that's super, super helpful. I know it was something that I did myself. I love the salt thing with I've never heard that before. That is brand new, and I will definitely be taking that and running with it.
I need to make a video about that before you do.
You do.
but yeah, I think it actually works. I've done that for years now. I mean, I've created little samples for many years now, and some of them are still perfect. I mean, they still smell great. Some, like if you take orange zest, for example, they also keep quite long, even for years, but the aroma just slightly changes. And interestingly, just because you just mentioned it, I've got 2 kids, and I train them already when it comes to kind of smelling stuff.
Yep.
So I don't know whether you've seen the Drops of God kind of series. Yeah. Yep. So that's kind of that's my goal. One day I'll be this this crazy guy sitting in a cellar practicing blind tasting with his kids. But
that's
but
right.
they actually
it's a family adventure.
Well, yeah. In the series, it doesn't look so nice, but yeah, we do it we do it in a more friendly and more fun way. But our kids actually really enjoy that as well. And that's kind of something that they really like, and they already, I don't think that they have better noses, but they've got a stronger appreciation for aromas already, just because we kind of try to teach them every now and then.
I think it's great. I do it with my nephew. My niece is still too young, but I do it with my nephew all the time. Even with just silly things, I'll close his eyes and put like an orange in front of him and say, "What does that smell?" And it's great because I think it develops their senses. It gets them excited about things that they may not have been excited about before. Obviously, we're not giving them wine, but when the time comes in their life to maybe explore that, we will be ready. Speaking of exploring, we haven't really talked about this wine at all. I've been dancing around it, and we're in our last minutes. I will say that this wine has changed actually pretty dramatically for me in the last hour or so. It was like really bright and kind of fruity, and now it's getting more dark and brooding. And I don't know exactly why, but it's smelling more like fall, which I appreciate, because it seems to me that the weather outside is getting a little bit more gloomy. And I like a moody emo sort of wine, which is sort of what this is giving me on the nose. And then on the palate, there's grip, there's tension, but it's light. It sort of reminds you of, somewhere between like a Cru Beaujolais and like a Dolcetto, and it's like bounciness. But also it has like the serious nature of something that, feels a little bit more Beaujolais, Cru Beaujolais in that way. What is your sense of this wine and Pinotage in general?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say Cru Beaujolais and Dolcetto. Those are actually great. I think you call them laterals, right? Grape varieties that you can compare this to. I think it does taste like that. It has those bright cherry flavors, but there's also this touch of banana that I got. I don't know whether you got that as well, which for me is something that I associate with Pinotage. Pinotage oftentimes also has these stalky aromas that can be a little bit off-putting, like tobacco-y notes. I don't think this one has that at all. It's quite bright and fruity. And on the palate, it obviously has this juiciness. The tannins are fairly light. The acidity is present, so it's fresh and lively. So it's a really enjoyable, fun kind of red, not too serious, but really really delicious and fruity. And I'm a big fan of Dolcetto and of Beaujolais, so this kind of fits my taste profile. When it comes to Pinotage in general, I'm actually not a big fan, to be honest. So it's not like this is a grape variety that I would pick up in a wine shop. I've tasted too many that I didn't like, because oftentimes it has this kind of tobacco-y flavor. For me, it oftentimes smells of old pipes. My father used to smoke pipes, and I sometimes, as a kid, kind of just sucked on them, and they had this dusty, tobacco-y flavor, and I get that from Pinotage quite often as well. So not necessarily something that I really enjoy. But yeah, as this wine proves, if you handle the grapes in the right way, and you handle it at the winery in the right way, you can produce great wines out of almost every grape variety. But yeah, Pinotage is not up on my list, not
Same.
even probably in the top 30.
No, same. I almost didn't even taste this when it was sent to me because I was like, I don't like Pinotage. There's no way that this would ever be a contender. It's not. And I was like, you know what, just taste it. Because I'd actually tasted a different wine from the same producer, and I actually really liked it. And I was like, all right, well, just open it, taste it. You're not going to not taste it. And I had this reaction that I was like, all right, well, maybe like I need to give Pinotage a chance. That said, I will say that most of what does make it into the US, and I don't know about the European market, is kind of as you described. Like there's not a lot of great representations that I've seen out there. And I think this is why I've had this opinion of Pinotage for as long as I've had it, is because most of what I've tasted is just not exciting or interesting. I liken it a little bit to Sauvignon Blanc in that way, which I realize is a very different grape. It's a noble grape, but Sauvignon Blanc is made horrifically throughout the entire world. There are some incredible examples of it, but I just almost categorically did not drink it for the longest time because I didn't like it.
The grassiness, or what did you not like it?
It was just everything. It was like, it was either too grassy or it was too angular. Or it was just not interesting. So there's just Sauvignon Blanc, I find, is often made in too diverse a style, and it becomes this thing where you have to, I don't know, I find it to be a very confusing grape in that when it doesn't have a sense of place and when it doesn't have an identity, which it so often lacks, I find it to be uninteresting and unappealing. But when one of those two things is employed in the right way, either terroir and or style, I find that Sauvignon Blanc becomes a very interesting and drinkable grape for me. Is it still the first thing I go to? No. But when it's done really well, it's delicious. And I think in some ways, Pinotage can be the same way for me. If it expresses terroir, if it's made in a way that has, a very specific style to it, I think I can get on board. And I think this one expresses place more so than it does style. It's clear to me the way that this is made in terms of the winemaking, that this is a wine that really just, they want to showcase place. They want to showcase, what the grape is doing here. I know a lot of people love Sauvignon Blanc. It's just not a grape that I gravitate towards. But Massican was actually, from Dan Petrosky, was the little $30 Sauvignon Blanc that could. And I was like, I actually kind of get it now.
I think for me with Pinotage, my theory at least is it's a crossing, so it's man-made, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So there are very few grape varieties that were created as a man-made crossing that actually produce great wine. I mean, in Germany, we have the most famous one is Müller-Thurgau, which I think is not very popular in the US, but it used to be fairly popular in New Zealand, and in Germany it was once the most widely planted grape variety. And it's man-made, so it's made with the intention of producing a certain style or certain quantities of wine. I think in the case of Pinotage, it's really man-made in order to kind of pair the aroma of Pinot with the robustness of Cinsault, and that kind of that intention maybe shows in the wine. So it's not necessarily something that was crossed naturally somewhere in a vineyard and then made it for all this time for centuries, and was planted and propagated and repropagated in different vineyards because it produced such great grapes. And maybe that's just the reason why I don't think Pinotage is quite the greatest grape variety, because the intentions behind making that grape variety were maybe not the right ones.
Yeah, and I think just to clarify something, this is a cross of as you mentioned, Pinot Noir and Cinsault, but this is not what we would consider like a hybrid variety. So these are both Vitis vinifera. These are not hybrids like you would see in the Finger Lakes. These are not the hybrids that you're seeing in cooler climate regions. this is a sort of separate category of that, even though it is man-made. Before we go, I would like to know, even though you're super busy with a lot of things, what is next for you, what's happening, and if there's anything exciting that people should know about.
Yeah, I mean, lots of things are happening. I'm traveling a lot right now, seeing many different places. But what I'm really focusing on right now, next to my YouTube channel and my import and distribution company and all the other things that I'm doing, is SellerClass, this online e-learning platform that I developed, and we created it completely independently. So it's really focused on getting more people interested in wine. We've started with 2 courses that kind of aim at different levels, at the beginner, and the second level is kind of at someone who's tasted wine and who got quite interested in wine, but doesn't know a whole lot and wants to deepen her or his knowledge. And then there's also a social media platform integrated in that site where we do regular live streams. So at least once a month, there's a live stream tasting where I sit in my studio and go through different grape varieties, and we talk through the chat or get people in and have conversations about wine. There's lots of educational posts on that platform. And of course, the community is able to share and interact with my post, but also with each other's posts. So people are kind of writing each other. I always really enjoyed getting to know other students. It was never only about learning when I went to university or different schools. It was also about building a network and getting to know other like-minded people. And I wanted to have that on SellerClass as well. So that element is called SellerClass Plus. And we obviously also offer great discounts for our community, also great wine access discount through SellerClass Plus. So this is really exciting. We just launched, and I already have new courses in the pipeline. So we're going to build out the platform. And at some point, I want this to be kind of the place where people can go to in order to learn more about wine, because I think, again, just like the way I started with YouTube, this is something that is missing. I mean, there are some offers, but I think there's not a lot of offers that really take wine knowledge, wine education to another level online. And not everyone wants to go and sit in a classroom every Tuesday for a few weeks. So they are able to just access the courses whenever they want and can really elevate their wine knowledge and get to know wine better in order to enjoy wine more. That's kind of the big goal, and in the end is really that they get to have more fun with wine.
I love that. Congratulations. I've done the wine course lift. It is no easy feat, especially when you develop your own platform for it to live on. So serious kudos to you and your team for getting that built out, because it is absolutely something that the wine industry needs. And it's something that is missing for consumers who, as you said, don't want to sit in a classroom. And why should they? Why should they be doing something as wonderful as drinking wine in a boring classroom? That sounds awful. Why would we not make this more fun?
Yeah.
You're crushing it. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope to see you in person at some point again. But in the meantime, for those of you who I may not cross paths with, please, this is your opportunity to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already, both on YouTube and wherever you are choosing to listen to this podcast, whatever platform that is. And then also leave us a review. This helps us tremendously. So preferably a 5-star one. If you've got feedback, you can send us a DM on that one. Just, leave it privately. We love feedback. And of course, if you want to drink along with us, you can find everything you need to sign up for the Wine Access Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club down below, where you find all the information on everything we talked about this episode, including where to find Konstantin, where to sign up for his classes. All that fun stuff that was discussed will be there. And in the meantime, cheers to you over in Baden-Baden. And I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.